Well, thank you guys for joining us as we go deeper into the concept of dating. And here's what I hope to accomplish in this teaching, is I want to give you some really practical things that you can do to have a healthier dating life. Now, as I say that, here's where I want to stop. If you did not watch the previous video in this series, the message that I taught on a Sunday morning about focusing on the right one, that's the title of it, then I need you to stop and go back and watch that. That is the foundation of this message. I will honestly say to you, if you don't listen to that, if you don't do that principle, then nothing that I say in this message will add value to you. I think these principles are powerful. I think they're biblical. But the foundation is what I talked about on Sunday, that you have to focus on you and your health first before you're even qualified to date and to pursue marriage. But once you listen to that, once you understand that principle, what I want to do now is I want to give you just a handful of things. I'll tell you a few personal stories and examples that I've learned through experience in my life as I dated Mary, who's now my wife. And what I hope is that you will hear these things and use it as a measuring tool to either measure your own heart or your own dating life right now. So if you're dating someone, I would encourage for you to do the same thing, that what you're doing right now by watching. Encourage them to watch it, maybe watch it together, have a really good discussion about it. And then always, like I say, if you have questions, feel free to send them in, and I would love to answer any questions that you have. So as you talk about dating and you think about dating, it first begins with you being a healthy person. But once you decide to date, here's the first point that you need to understand. Your spouse, so the reason that you're dating is to find a marriage spouse, your spouse will not complete you, will not be your Savior. Now, there's a movie that at this point is pretty old, so there's a good chance that some of you that are dating now have probably never even heard of this movie, but there's a movie called Jerry Maguire. It stars Tom Cruise. And there's this famous line at the very end of the movie where he is coming to reconcile with the woman that he loves, his wife, and he comes and he's talking to her and he's trying to win her back in front of this room full of other women, and they're all been kind of bashing marriage, and he's looking at her and he's talking to her and he's giving her this whole spiel, and then he stops at the end and he looks at her and he says, "You complete me." And her response as he tries to continue to communicate is she tells him to shut up and she says, "You had me at hello." It's like this big romantic quote from a movie that's famous. But the truth is what Tom Cruise says in that movie, "You complete me," is not true, and it's not a healthy perspective. And the reason I say that now when talking about marriage is that many people go into dating thinking that what they need to do is find someone that will complete them. Now, there's a truth. We are designed for relationships. We're not designed to be alone in and of ourselves. We're designed to have friendships. There is a natural God-given design in our hearts to connect romantically and relationally. And so God has placed that in our hearts to pursue. But if you think that what you need in order to be complete is another person, then that is just setting you up for disappointment. And also, you need to hear this, if you think your spouse is going to complete you, you are putting an incredible weight on them that they will never be able to satisfy. So here's what I want to say to you. I want to read this scripture. This is Colossians 2:9. Talking about Jesus, it says, "For in him the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily, and you have been filled in him who is the head of all rule and authority." You have been filled by him and in him. You can be complete in Jesus. Now, you expect a pastor to say that. You really do. For me to say, like, don't put your hope in your future wife. Don't put your hope in your future husband. Put your hope in Jesus. So it sounds like a pastoral thing to say, but it's the truth. If you, in your life, feel incomplete, that is a perfect time to pursue Jesus more, not pursue dating. You have to come to a place where you find your identity, your value, you find your purpose for life in Jesus and not in something or someone else. If you are trying to find your identity in a job, that's unhealthy. If you're trying to find your value in your bank account, that's unhealthy. In all things, you need to find yourself in Jesus and be comfortable in him. Otherwise, you will naturally put that weight on someone else, and that's just an unbearable weight for a spouse to have. And I've seen this. As a pastor, I've done so much marriage counseling where I hear an individual consistently expressing why they're dissatisfied in life and they're blaming their spouse, and almost never does it seem to me to be the real thing that they're complaining about. they'll say, and my spouse doesn't do this, my spouse doesn't do that, and that's why I'm so dissatisfied. And in my mind, as I hear it, I think, no, it's just because you have a void that you think your spouse can fulfill or fill in your life, and that's not true. God designed us to be fully dependent upon Him, and when we are and are satisfied in Him or see Him as the source of our hope and life, and so we always run to Him, then we are able to just love someone else, to focus on them for what they need and not what they can provide for us. And this is what God has called us to do, to die to ourselves and love well, but we will never do that if we don't focus on Jesus first so that we can then love our spouses well. Here's the second truth you need to know about dating. Get to know him or her before it's romantic. You should not hurry into a romantic relationship. And this is one thing that is absolutely backwards in our culture. Our culture believes that you should be romantic first and then friends. I mean, with the increase in online dating, which I'm not against online dating in and of itself, but the idea of people being matchmakers and introducing other people, there are many people who begin on a date. Even the concept of a blind date is, let's begin romantically, let's start the relationship here, and then let's become friends later. Here's what I would encourage you. Flip that around. Become friends first, and then decide if you want to pursue romance with someone else. Now, I want you to think about this. The foundation of your relationship, if it's not a relationship, then what is it that you're going to build on? Physical attraction? Now, obviously, that's where most people begin, and that's okay to be attracted to someone, but where does that go from there? Typically, that goes into the physical, oftentimes way too soon in a relationship that can lead you towards sinful behaviors. But if you begin by observing someone's life, becoming friends with them, connecting them in group dates and just group hangouts and that concept, you get to evaluate a person and decide, are they even worth pursuing before you've invested anything emotionally or physically or mentally in that relationship. And so I want to encourage you, be friends first. Now, Mary and I, when we started dating, I was a freshman in high school. So we started dating. She was a sophomore. I was a freshman. That first year, we had nothing, zero part of our relationship that was physical or romantic. Now, I knew I was attracted to her. I knew I liked her. It was obvious that she felt the same way about me. So we were friends, and even I would say more than friends, in that everyone around us recognized that we liked each other. But we had zero element of our relationship that was physical. I didn't even hold her hand for over a year in the relationship. So after that first year, when we came back to school and we were continuing in our relationship, it was only then that we started to engage each other more like boyfriend and girlfriend. But get this, it wasn't until the end of that year, so now about almost 2 years into the relationship, before we ever held hands, before we ever even brought physical into the relationship. And that was just something simple as a kiss on the cheek. And so our relationship, she was legitimately my best friend at that point. For 2 years, we had so connected relationally that when we decided to officially become boyfriend and girlfriend, then we already had this solid foundation in our relationship. I knew her character, she knew me, she knew my character, and so it was very healthy. And I would say now, all these years later, from that moment, she has continued to be my absolute best friend. But it has to begin in friendship and not in romance. And this is a mistake so many people make. So if you're interested in dating someone, get to know them. And even if you express it to them, if someone asks you out, hey, do you want to go on a date? Say to them, if you're interested, why don't we just become friends first? Why don't we start talking first, actually on the phone? Why don't we just hang out in groups? We have some friends that are in common. Let's hang out in some groups. Let's just get to know each other. I know it sounds countercultural, but it is so healthy and such a solid foundation for a dating relationship. Here's the next point. Date with purpose. I am against the concept of dating for fun, and here's the reason why. Dating for fun is a recipe for disaster. So let me explain what I mean. I'm not saying dating should be not fun, but when people have the mindset of like, I don't have any intention of getting married just for this season of life, I'm just going to have fun in dating, that's a horrible and dangerous decision to make. And here's why. Your heart can fall in love with the wrong person. Our hearts naturally fall in love. And so if you're dating for fun, you might date the wrong person and absolutely fall in love with them. and then eventually go down a pathway that might even lead toward marriage, and that is the absolute wrong person for you. You need to have purpose. There's a scripture that I've taught on often. Actually, this past New Year's, I taught on this passage and this concept, but it's 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Paul says it this way. He says, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified." So here's what Paul is saying. He's like, guys, I don't do anything just carelessly. I don't do anything without purpose. I have set my eyes on the mark. And the mark he set in this context was to live for Christ, to honor Christ, and it has to be the same way in our lives. But what that means, if we have set our eyes on a mark to honor Christ, is that every element of our lives has to fall into that, which includes dating if we decide to date. And so we have to make a decision of what that looks like. What is a healthy relationship, and what are the standards that I'm going to honor before I ever date a person, and then I'm going to hold to that. Only date those people who meet your qualifications, which means you have to think about what you desire in a future spouse. And when I say that, I don't mean that like in a just kind of a carefree way, like, oh yeah, I want someone that's nice, someone that's kind. That's great, but everybody wants that. I'm talking about being very specific. I want a person who is godly, but what does that look like? I want a person who is actively involved in church. I want a person who has an active devotional life. They are seeking God. This is not a carefree thing that they do. They are passionate about their discipleship and loving Jesus Christ. I want a person with high character, a person who is honest, a person who serves, a person who is respectful of others. I want to see how this person interacts with their own mother and their siblings and other people. When they're in private, how do they talk about others? Make a list. You want a person that is generous. You want a person that is patient. You want a person that is thoughtful. You want a person that is self-aware so they know what's going on. You want a person that is what? Fill in the blank. Make that list and then decide, again in the concept of friendship, as you evaluate someone's life, do they meet these qualifications? And if not, hear me on this, do not date them. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that people make. They go, this person doesn't meet these qualifications, so I will date them to change them. One, that is so unwise. Two, that's unbiblical. Here's a couple other warnings that Paul gave about this specific idea. In 1 Corinthians 15:33, he says, "Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals." Now, I love how he begins that, the phrase right in the beginning. Do not be deceived. Why? Because everybody is deceived about this idea. Every person who dates, and what was referred to when I was growing up as missionary dating, every single person has it in their mind that they will be the exception, that they're going to be the ones to turn that person around. But here's what Paul says. This reminds me, like when I was growing up, my friends would smack their lips and go, please. Like someone would say something that wasn't true, and they're, please. That's how I picture Paul in this, is people going, no, I'll be the exception. I can date someone and I can connect to someone that doesn't have the same beliefs that I do, and it's going to be okay. I'm going to change them. And Paul goes, please. This is what he's saying. Do not be deceived. Do not think that you'll be the exception. Bad company ruins good morals. You hang out with someone who has lesser morals than you, they will bring you down. Here's another way that he says it. 2 Corinthians 6:14. Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? What accord has Christ with Belial? Or what portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? And here's Paul's challenge. Paul's challenge is, guys, understand this. You cannot deeply relationally connect with someone who has a different value system than you, because they will pull you down. It is not your place in a deep, personal, connected relationship to try to change them. Now, you might hear that and think, oh, what about evangelism? What he's saying is you are not going to connect with them on an equal level. You might view someone as a project in the sense that you love this person, you want them to know Jesus, you're going to witness to them, you're going to love them. but you're not going to connect as equals and hang out and share life together because their lack of morality, their lack of beliefs that line up with yours are eventually going to pull you down. And so you can't do this in marriage, but you can't do this in dating. To yoke yourself with an unbeliever, someone that doesn't meet the qualifications that you've set for them. So here's what I say. Set that list, evaluate a person in friendship. If they meet these qualifications, you can date them. If they do not, then if you need to change them in friendship, but do not start that romantic relationship. Now here's the last thing about dating with purpose. And this is the one that shocks a lot of people, but I just say it bluntly. The moment in that dating relationship that you realize you don't want to marry them, they're not the person for you, you should break up in that moment. Like, if you realize it on this day, you should break up with them that day. Why? Sounds harsh. I don't mean it to be harsh. Here's the reason why. Your heart will naturally grow more and more affectionate towards someone. You will fall in love with someone. As I've already said, even the wrong person. So you have to make that decision. I sense that this is not the right person for me. Instead of continuing to go down this road that is dangerous, I'm going to end the relationship respectfully so that I can protect my heart and protect that person's heart. Here's the next thing. Be pure. Be pure sexually. Be pure in your relationship. Why? This is what it says in Scripture. Hebrews 13:4. Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled. For God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. When you hear this, a lot of people, most people, when they read this passage, they just think simply he's talking about those that are married. He's actually not. He's talking to both single and to married. Here's what he's saying in this. He goes, I'm going to read it again. Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled. He is talking about the concept of sexuality in marriage. So he's talking about a husband and a wife in marriage. And so if you can picture this as a time in the sense of, so whether in the future or in the past, what he's just saying is the marriage bed, this intimacy in marriage, he goes, this should not be defiled. This should not be something that is ever sinful. But then the phrase that he uses, he says, for God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulterous. So the reason that matters is if someone is married and there's any form of sexual immorality, what is that called? It's always called adultery. So the fact that he points out sexual immorality and adultery shows that he's talking about two different types of sin, but specifically still about the marriage bed. For those that are married, any behavior after marriage that is sexually immoral is adultery. That's sinful. That's not protecting the marriage bed. But any sexual activity before marriage is sexual immorality and is not protecting the marriage bed. So what Paul, or the writer of Hebrews, is saying is whether you're single or you're married, you need to honor and protect the sexual intimacy of marriage. So here's what I'll say to you. If you're not married, you do not have the right to engage someone sexually in any way. And when I say sexually, I'm talking about any form of sexual activity. That is sexual intercourse, that is oral sex, that is manual stimulation. In any way you are not to engage someone sexually, that is not your right. If you say, but I love them, here's what I would say to you. Love is not the qualifying element that God gives us for sexuality. Marriage is. And if you truly love them, you will not take something that is not yours to take. You will not give to them something that is not yours to give. Every single person I have ever met has always desired that their spouse that they got connected to, if they could have the perfect ideal world, everybody desired that their spouse would have been a virgin when they got married. Why? Because it is such a powerful tool that God has given us to be connected to someone, and everybody recognizes it's so personal, so intimate, it is something only designed for one person to experience with one other person. So here's what you can do in your relationship. You can honor that person and love them by not being physical with them and protecting the marriage bed that's in the future. Your marriage bed and their marriage bed. If God's will is for you two to get married and then you go into it, here's what I promise. You will never regret not having sex before marriage. But almost every person I talk to regrets being sexually active before they got married, even those who got married to each other. And so here's some practical advice that I can give you about this. As you look at this, understand this, Physical intimacy is not something that has to be a part of your dating relationship. This is a total misconception. My encouragement to everyone is do not bring physical intimacy, relational affection, anything. Do not bring physical into your dating relationship. Now, this sounds so old-fashioned and unrealistic, but I mean ever. Okay, so let me go back to my relationship, and then I'll come back to this. When I was dating Mary, we dated for 8 years before we got married. 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, and then we got married. We, in that process, did not bring the physical into it for a couple of years, 2-3 years, 2.5 years before we started to kiss, and even as embarrassing as this might sound to some of you, before Mary and I started to make out. Okay, so we were later on in high school. We loved each other. We had some parameters around our dating relationship that helped us to remain pure. We were never in a home alone. We were really careful about where we went on dates, and just a lot of things that were designed to keep us pure. But one of Mary and my greatest regrets was that we ever brought physical into the relationship. And you know why? Because those last couple of years when we loved each other and we knew we were going to get married, everything was pointing in that direction. It was so difficult to remain pure. I'm thankful that God's power sustained us in that season, and Mary and I both were virgins when we got married. But that was difficult. That was so difficult in a relationship, and we regret ever bringing physical in. Why do people ever bring physical in? One, your body is naturally drawn toward that. You have hormones. You want to connect to them. You want to be physically connected. That's a God-given desire that you have, but it's a desire for marriage. Also, a misconception in our culture is that you have to have some type of affection to show love. It's not true. You don't have to have physical affection to show love. Now, let me actually just kind of qualify that a little bit better. A kiss, as in a smooch, a kiss, I call them smooches in my home. A smooch is a sign of affection. I smooch my wife, I smooch my kids, so my boys and my daughter, I'll even say, come give me a smooch. So that's my phraseology. That's a kiss. That is a sign of affection. That is a sign of love. A hug is a sign of affection, a sign of love. That is proper. Making out is foreplay. Making out is prepping your body for sex. It will naturally lead you toward that. It will stir all of the hormones, all of the bodily functions that you have going on inside your mind and all of your emotions to prepare your body to engage in sex. So when you bring physical affection, where it goes to the point of making out, into a relationship, you have at that moment set a timer that will eventually lead to sex. It might be years, it might be weeks, it might be months, it might even be that day. Because you will not think clearly in that moment because your body is preparing for sexual activity. And when you engage that and then you stop, so you start to make out and then you stop, you're frustrated. Your body is frustrated about that and you want more. Here's the other dynamic of that. You make out, it's exciting, it's new, it's like, wow, this is so cool. But then you stop. Do you know eventually you'll have to do more to have that same excited moment? You start to kiss. Well, we've already done that for weeks. We've already done that for months. Let's go deeper. And you will engage more and more till eventually it will end in sex because that is how your body is God designed to operate. So the longer you can wait before you bring physical in it, the better. And if you never bring physical into a dating relationship, you will be better for it. You will honor the marriage bed and protect it. If you've already violated this, then you can set some strict parameters to go back and protect your dating relationship so that you can continue to honor the marriage bed. Let me tell you two last things. Number 5, include godly friends. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23, it says, "Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." Include godly friends in your relationship, not just to hang out and have group dates, so that's a great part of it because you get to know each other, but you want your friends to know the person that you're dating because you will need their advice. Here's just a fact of life. I think we all get this. We are blinded by love. We are blinded by attraction. There are things that people we're connected to do that are really obvious to others, but because we are emotionally connected to them, we don't see it. It's a blind spot. An example, not in a romantic sense, is so many parents to their kids, they think their kids walk on water. Other people see them and are like, no, their kids are just as disobedient, just as much a problem. What is it? It's that love that blinds us. Same thing happens in dating. You can be so attracted to, connected, that you think this person is amazing and awesome, and everyone else can see big, giant red flags of how something's unhealthy. So here's my encouragement. Have godly friends, include them in the process to get to know the person that you're dating, and then, here's the tough one, in private, ask their advice and give it weight. As they share, do not get mad at them if they don't like the person you're dating. Hear what they have to say, hear the reasons why, and then take it to God, process through, and if they have concerns, give that a lot of weight because they are probably seeing quite a bit more accurate than you are. Lastly, here's my last advice. Grow spiritually together. Go to church together. If you have to drag them to church, break up with that person. Do you hear me on that? If you are the one pulling them and they're like, yeah, I love God. Like, that's one of the most frustrating things when I talk to someone and I go, the person you're dating, are they a Christian? And they go, well, they love God. I'm always like, you know what that means? They don't go to church. That means they don't have a relationship with God. And they say, well, I love God. If you have to drag them to church, that's not a person that meets the qualifications that you should set for yourself. You should be growing spiritually together. I would encourage you to go to church together. Have spiritual conversations, whether you're doing devotions together, but have spiritual conversations. Talk about God. And in that process, see if their relationship is authentic. Because they might only be going to church because they like you and they love you. And I'm still glad they're going to church. But make sure that their relationship with God is authentic. And the only way that happens is if you are growing spiritually together. Friends, that's just some foundational things. But that's some things that if you will implement in your relationship, I truly believe will help you have a healthier dating relationship, one that can lead toward a healthy marriage. If you have any questions, let us know. And even in this series, if you get them to us soon enough, in the next couple of weeks, I will do a Q&A series, another message that we'll release where I'll answer any questions. So feel free to send them in. I love you guys. See you soon.